Thank you. Thank you, choir. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Gregory. I want to start by thanking Ben Kornfeld and Bridget Wild for purchasing this sermon from the Serendipity auction in November. Ben and Bridget and I had lunch before Christmas, and I was eager to hear what topic they wanted me to explore. When patience was suggested as the theme, I hoped then, as I do now, that the expectation was not that I teach you how to be patient. I've never been a patient person. Thankfully, Bridget explained her interest in the topic was related to our evolution as a species into less patient beings and into more and more instant gratification-seeking creatures. This seems to be an adaptive response to our frenetic world, and yet patience is still held as an ideal we strive for, one we expect from one another, and one we teach our children. We teach with our words that patience is a virtue, but our actions tell a different story. Sacred texts and age-old stories claim that love is patient and kind, that slow and steady wins the race, that nice people are patient people. Ben and Bridget marvel at the patience of their children's teachers and have experienced the patience of the Cubs fan, which was rewarded in 2016. Patience has been an elusive quality for me for as long as I can remember. I could throw one heck of a temper tantrum when I was a kid, with magnificent feet stomping and thunderous door slamming. Those expressions of impatience I recognize now was about not having control over things that were happening in my life. And I've had plenty of adult temper tantrums, true, let's be real. They may look a little different, but I can still react from time to time, overreact with outrage when I'm confronted with the truth that I continue to have very little control over the things that happen in my life. There are moments seared in my shame, the shame center of my brain, when as a new, unexperienced teacher, and even more as a new mother, when I acted out of impatience and behaved in ways that were hurtful. Times I felt not in control of the situation or myself. Breaking moments when impatience, like a bird of prey, swooped down and snatched my centered calm in an instant. Thankfully, those moments are fewer and farther between than they used to be. When it does happen, it usually involves technology of some kind, or a health insurance issue. And I'm usually able to regain my composure and balance fairly quickly. It's hard to know if that's the result of practice or age or the fact that I no longer spend most of my time with one or more 3-year-olds. It was a hard time for me. Maybe it's simply that as I get older, I have more practice with patience. I've had more time to add to the accumulated moments of being present and allowing life to be what it is. Still, I know patience will be a lifelong practice for me. This past week, about 14 of us met for the third of our 4-part Deepening Our UU Identity series. The session was on UU spirituality and spiritual practices. The 2 hours was barely enough time for us to dip our toes into exploring what spiritual practice is, but I think we all agree that almost anything can be a spiritual practice if it's done with regularity and with intention. There are countless ways of developing a spiritual practice, from taking deep breaths at a stoplight to washing the dishes mindfully, paying attention while walking the dog, or spending 20 minutes in seated meditation. A regular spiritual practice can build our resilience and our ability to manage the stresses of our lives. A spiritual practice can grow our capacity to be patient with ourselves and with each other. Psychologist and meditation instructor Tara Brach offers a simple practice with the mnemonic device, Rain, R-A-I-N. That can be done in moments when we are flooded with anxiety. Rain can remind us to recognize what's happening, to allow the experience to be there just as it is, to investigate with interest and care the source of the discomfort, and to nurture ourselves with compassion. There are all kinds of mnemonic devices that are designed to help us develop positive habits or ways of coping. They may seem gimmicky, but I think they can be helpful. HALT is one that I learned long ago when emotions are bubbling up and about to boil over, asking myself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Our overreactions are rarely about the thing that we think that we're upset with. When I'm screaming at the car in front of me that just cut me off, what's really going on? Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Whatever our practice of patience, it must begin with ourselves. Perhaps the hardest place to start. Reverend Teresa Soto, UU minister and activist, encourages patience with ourselves in their poem, The Life Slow and Precious. Soto writes, no matter how imperceptible the movement, how long it takes to reach the best version of who you mean to be, you are irreplaceable. You are meant to live. Reverend Soto knows something about resilience, I can assure you, and I bet you do too. Only you know the full weight of what you carry as you move through the world. Only you have the complete picture of what it is you are struggling against to make it through each day. And only you have within you the precise alchemy of what you need to navigate the complex interweaving of suffering, joy, and possibility unfolding through your life. Recovering that wisdom from the archaeological dig that is your soul buried in the world's rubble will take some time and your patience. Let us practice patience with ourselves right here, right now. Breathe in with me. And breathe out. Breathe in again and think to yourself, I am enough. And breathe out peace. Breathe in, I am enough. And breathe out peace. I encourage you to practice patience with yourself in the moments you feel anxious, lost, frustrated, out of control, by simply taking 3 deep breaths. Affording ourselves patience with our precious hearts has to precede the patience we build for others. Love is patient and kind, and it takes a lifetime of practice to grow patience in ourselves and in our relationships. As a young mother, I was only able to begin to relax a little and enjoy the magnificent gift that parenthood is, the gift I dreamed of living since I was a child myself, when I figured out that I needed to lessen the expectations I had of myself, the expectation that I needed to be the perfect mother, never angry or cross. I had 0 tolerance for my own shortcomings or patience, which only diminished the patience I had with my children. Practicing patience with others is a key component of any relationship, and relationship building is at the heart of our mission to nurture the human spirit for a world made whole. Creating a more just, equitable, and peaceful world is only possible within and through relationships. This message seeped into my heart this past Sunday at the Interfaith Martin Luther King service at Alice Millar Chapel. We need one another. We don't just need those who we get along with. We don't just need those who we are aligned with politically, socially, economically, who share our identities and experiences. We need everyone to make the world whole. And for that, we will need patience. Lord, will we need patience? It is hard to be patient with those we strongly disagree with, who have different priorities and values. Heck, it's hard to have patience with the ones we love the most, the ones we're aligned with. We are each separate individuals interconnected on this increasingly crowded and rapidly moving planet. Being patient with each other will require patient listening, really listening to one another, and working to set aside our assumptions and our counter-arguments. Nonviolent compassionate communication, founded by Marshall Rosenberg, is another useful tool in practicing patience in relationship. One of the central components is another acronym. It's not mnemonic because it doesn't really spell anything, but it's still useful. O stands for observations, naming what is happening objectively without judgment or criticism. F stands for feelings, identifying what you are feeling about what is happening, using I statements. N stands for needs, thinking about what you really need in this moment. And R stands for requesting those needs. I've found this really helpful at times when I'm having difficult conversations, observing what is really happening without exaggerating or assuming the feelings and motivations of another, being in touch with what I'm feeling and asking for clarity about what the other person is feeling, and requesting what I need, which is not the same as what I want, knowing that I might not get what I need from this person. We can practice listening for the needs that reside under angry words, expressions of fear, and actions of division. This is not about accepting unacceptable behavior. It's about building our listening skills and our compassion muscles. I hope by this point I've made it clear that patience is a valuable spiritual practice, and maybe I've given you a few useful strategies for practicing patience with yourself and others. And yet what arose from the initial conversation I had with Bridget and Ben is how the call for patience can clash with the urgent cry for justice and the need for us to act boldly and swiftly in response to any number of critical issues. I thought about how demanding patience can be a way of silencing resistance to change. I wonder if both patience and impatience can be a spiritual practice. As Bridget pointed out, we are an increasingly anxious, brittle, and petulant species. My words, not hers. There's more and more to be anxious and alarmed about. We are rapidly approaching the brink of climate devastation from which we cannot return. Authoritarian and totalitarian regimes are on the rise all over the world, seemingly egging each other on, puffing themselves up to intimidate and wrest power from one another. People are flooding to our border, from desperation to degradation and despair, with little or no hope of turning back or finding safety ahead. Parents without alternatives are sending their young children across the border alone, turning them over to customs and border protection agents. And as the next presidential election looms, it feels ever more urgent to enfranchise progressive voters. There are things toward which we are called by love to cultivate a posture of patience, and there are things toward which we should remain steadfastly impatient. As Martin Luther King preached, there are things to which we should remain maladjusted. He said, I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism, to self-defeating effects of physical violence. End quote. Can we hold in creative tension both urgency and patient persistence? The ethos of nonviolent resistance is centered around the paradox of civil disobedience, of being patiently impatient, of neither submission nor violence, but a third way, as Christian author and teacher Walter Wink describes in his book, Jesus and Nonviolence. There is a third way beyond our primal response of fight or flight, which is nonviolent resistance to injustice. Wink writes, most Christians desire nonviolence, yes, but they are not talking about nonviolent struggle for justice. They mean simply the absence of conflict. They would like the system to change without having to be involved in changing it. Neutrality in a situation of oppression always supports the status quo. End quote. The practice of nonviolence is not about doing nothing or waiting submissively for the world to become what we know it should be. It is a creative action of resilience and resistance. To participate in the remaking of the world into the beloved community we long for will require our creativity. We will need creativity to respond to the urgency of this moment without further violence and harm. We will need to hold together patience with each other and impatience with systems of oppression and violence. Dr. King spoke of a necessary tension. There is a tension in the practice of holding in one hand patience with ourselves and each other, of cultivating that practice every day and as many times a day as we can, to breathe into our human uniqueness, beauty, and imperfection. We must hold that practice in tension with impatience towards the systems of oppression that capitalize on scarcity and fear. I am so tired of fear and scarcity ruling the day. I have grown weary of the acceptance of unacceptable behavior because the economy is strong. I have grown impatient with the tolerance of the evil abuse of power as just the way it is. I am impatient with the ability of our leaders to turn away from the reality of climate change and the failure of imagination and moral courage to demand we do something right now. Beloveds, we need one another to practice every day, building our capacity for patience with each other so we don't give up on the transformative power of love, so that we never lose faith in our resilience, in the possibility of goodness in humanity. And we need one another to rededicate ourselves to being impatient with the status quo. We need one another to practice patience with those who feel and react out of the trauma of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and all the ways we marginalize one another. At the same time, we need to practice impatience with the nullifying response to cries for justice at the border, the cries for climate justice, for an end to gun violence, for an end to escalating inequality. A spiritual practice of patience can take the shape of listening, breathing, singing, weeping, lamenting, or creating beauty. Remind yourself, it is a practice. You can't do it right, and you can't do it wrong, and you can't do it alone. With a practice, there is no try, only do. The same is true of a spiritual practice of impatience. A spiritual practice of impatience calls us to write letters to the editor, to write and call our lawmakers, to show up, to witness and demand and sing and move and breathe and weep and lament together. Again, there's no right way, no right amount to practice impatience. It is cumulative and collective. Can we practice patiently asking questions and listening to one another as we wrestle with what it means to live in a white supremacist society, while at the same time practice impatience with the very real impacts of that white supremacist society on the lives of people of color? Can we practice patience with each other as we consider possible solutions to our broken immigration system while remaining fervently impatient with our government for leaving thousands of asylum seekers languishing at our border? Can we practice patience with the feeling of being overwhelmed by the enormity of the climate crisis, by the sense of immobilization that comes when we don't know where to begin or how we can make a difference, while voicing our righteous impatience with climate change denial? Friends, are you with me in practicing patience and impatience? Can I get an amen? However you practice, and I know you do, there are countless ways of practicing that impatience and patience. May you feel encouraged to stay in the struggle, to slowly and imperfectly build power, resilience, and revolutionary love. Beloveds, you are enough. We are enough. And there is too much work to be done, and it's too important to rush it. As we strive to make the world whole, let us hold one another and ourselves with holy patience and impatient love. May it be so. May we make it so.